Good evening. And it says on my script, welcome to our final meetup before the summer holidays. Welcome to the final meetup before the summer holidays. Is that right? Should it be the way? Oh, no. So we will be back with you on Tuesday the 29th of September. Do we know what with yet? Okay, so suggestions are gratefully received. And always, if you want to stand up here, as Leigh's going to do tonight for us, if you want to stand up and you want to share an idea with us, give a presentation or a war story or tales from the trenches, however you want to describe it, or promote something that you're doing, then please come and see us. Everyone is welcome. You don't have to be a trained professional. Look at me. That was a joke. It says here, if you would like to provide contact for this, please contact Claire Bow. For those of you who don't know, Claire Bow is that young lady there with the dark hair and glasses. And it's really her fault that this even happens at all. So thank you very much, Claire. Also, I'd like to say thank you tonight for the food. Wasn't it amazing? Yeah. No, wasn't it amazing? Yes. So every time we have one of these, my wife says, what did you have to eat? And I go, pizza and a bottle of beer. And she goes, oh. So it was really, really nice to see that tonight. So thank you very much to Rowling IT for the food. But But as they say on the old infomercial channels, not that I watch many of them, honest, is, but wait, that's not all. Is there anyone in the audience who's observing Ramadan? Anyone? Because if you are, not only have they provided food for us pagans and heathens and whichever deity you follow, but they've also provided little food bags for you to take away, which you can have after sunset, which I think is really nice, so thank you for that. And if that's not enough, wait, that's not all. In the bar at the bakery, which is just down the road, they are going to treat us to a drink again. So thank you very much, Rowling IT. But wait, that's not all. Amy and Holly were up all last night baking the brownies and cakes. So if you had a brownie and a cake, thank you, Amy and Holly. Okay, so what have we got for you tonight? So we've got an introduction from our sponsor, who's Amy from Rowling IT, and then we'll be having some talks. We've got a few talks for you tonight. So we've got the intro from Amy. Then we're going to have Leigh Rathbone, who's sharing our title tonight, which is basically fail. But I'll leave the detail for Leigh. Then we've got 20 minutes from, I've got the names here, 3 times 20 minutes talks, I should say, from Ross McDonald, Chris Welding from Sage, and they're going to be sharing TDD, test-driven development, the trials and errors and what they went through. And then finally we've got David Duke, Kristen and David from the BBC who are sharing a whole bag of fail, it looks like, as well. So a whole evening of fail. That sounds pretty awesome. So without further ado, I will hand over to Amy from Rowling IT, and she's going to give us a short introduction, announce competition. No? Do us a dance? A couple of jokes? No, none of the above. Go on, Amy.
Hello, my name's Amy. As you can see, I work for Rowling IT Plus. We're an IT recruitment agency. The reason that I'm here tonight is because I specialise in recruiting testers, so I don't recruit any other part of the IT life cycle. And a few months ago, Claire and Ken were kind enough to let me join this group because I don't think that you can try and recruit for something unless you take the time to educate yourself on what the challenges are that testers actually face on a daily basis, what you look for in your next role, what motivates you, what drives you. So I've been lucky enough to come here for the past couple of months to observe some fantastic speeches by some great people that's really helped me to learn more about testing and helped me to understand it a lot more. My role at Rowling, to be clear, is recruitment of both permanent and contract testers. So I recruit everything from test analyst up to head of QA and test level. I do that on a, like I say, perm and contract basis, but I just focus on Greater Manchester and the North West. So I'm ideally placed to go out and meet people, which I try and do as often as possible. So my role is to bring on new candidates, but also I am currently taking on new clients onto my book. So if anybody has gaps in the testing team and they want someone who just solely focuses on that, my contact details are handy. And like Stu says, the bags for Ramadan are just over there, so if you want to grab me, if you want to take one of those home with you, and then drinks are at bakery afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so next up we've got 20 minutes, give or take? Yeah, okay. 20 minutes, give or take. I can't even get my words out tonight. Definitely not had enough alcohol. Of Leigh Rathbone sharing Fail. Over to you, Lee.
Cheers, thank you.
You now need the cyborg stick.
Do I have to do an Amy and turn around? Okay. So, evening everybody. I'm Leigh Rathbone. I've been in the testing arena for about 17 years, give or take a few months. I've never presented to a public presentation before or a public talk, so fair play to anybody who has stood up here before and actually spoken to you guys, because I tell you what, I'm absolutely bricking it. So I'd like to just take us back to the previous Northwest Tester meeting, where I think it was Richard that gave the talk about performance testing. And I think from that talk, I could see a load of people making notes, and I took a load of notes and I took them into work the next day, and there was loads of value in that. Don't expect that from my talk, because simply this is just me sharing my experiences. This is just me sharing my fails with you. This is me opening up my soul to you guys. I think British culture is such that fail is perceived as a dirty word, but if we think about what our jobs are as testers, as curious explorers, our job is to find failures. Our job is to be brave and find that failure, not only in other people's work, but our own as well. So in my presentation, in my talk, I talk about the taboo subject of the word fail, where it may have come from in the British culture. And then I'll give a few examples of epic fails where I've been involved, and why they've turned out to be successes and why they've made me stronger. So when I thought about this presentation and this talk, a particular film sprung to mind. And the film was a film where the main character goes from each help group to help group, pretending to be suffering from a particular illness or disease. And it's this film. Fight Club. So I thought, how cool would it be if we had a fail club, where we actually said the first rule of fail club is it's okay to talk about failures. How about the second rule of fail club is not only is it okay to talk about failure, it's okay because it turns into successes, it makes us stronger. So I thought maybe afterwards we could start with our own little failure club, we could get our own little gatherings going, maybe beat each other up afterwards like they do in Fight Club. But actually, failure and actually getting together and opening your soul, and the guys that are speaking today about their experiences, it takes a hell of a lot of balls, I think, in this culture, in this country, to talk about the failures that you have. So when I researched and started coming up with some key people that talk about failure, I think J.K. Rowling's pretty cool. And I'll just give you a second to read that, because I think it's really important. And this guy is even cooler. I love this guy, Mr. Dyson. So there's a bit of interaction with my talk. I'll give you a couple of seconds to read that one. I'm moving around so that everybody can actually see the screen, because if I stand in one place, I'll block someone's view. But when I looked at Dyson, I actually thought, how many times did he fail with that vacuum that he invented before he actually succeeded? So let's have a show of hands. Okay, so hands up who thinks he failed maybe 100 times before he actually got the vacuum to actually work. Okay, 200, keep your hands up, by the way. Those that said 100, keep them up. 400, and keep your hands up. Okay, 500. 1,000. 2,000. Keep your hands up. Those that have kept your hands up, keep them up. 3,000. Okay. After 3, I'm going to ask. No, keep your hands up. After 3, those people who've got their hands up, put your hands down. Those that haven't got your hands up, stand up. So 1, 2, 3. Stand up, those people that haven't gambled so far. Okay, let's go around the room. How many do you think, Tom?
5,000. I don't think you failed to talk. Getting a vacuum cleaner is a pretty simple thing to do. So vacuum cleaner, it'll work, but it won't. It'll either suck and it won't.
Fair play.
100.
100. We've already had 100.
He never really failed because he succeeded.
Okay. $5,126. So Tom, you were, no, who was it who said 5,000? Okay, Mark, not, oh, sorry, I thought, that's rubbish, sorry. It actually says round about here, 5,126, and it actually says here the payoff was a multi-billion-dollar company known for its creativity and forward thinking. So 5,126 attempts to get a vacuum to work. Some would say he was a compulsive failure. But actually, I admire him because every day he must have faced failure and thought, no, it's not going to beat me. I'm not going to let it beat me. And what he actually invented was a company that was forward-thinking, a company that was creative, showed innovation. Now, this quote, I like this quote, but it's just one bit that I would question. That's what we should be teaching our children at school. I can question that. Should we really be saying to kids, if you fail, get to the back of the bloody queue and bloody fail again? That's the way I read that. And I just thought, should we really be enforcing at school the message of failure? If they succeed, they succeed. But that's about the only part of that quote that I questioned. But then I came across this one which I liked, but then I really hated. And I liked it, then I hated it, I took it out, I put it back in the presentation. And I actually think this cuts to the core of British culture and to the core of why fail could be perceived as a dirty word in the British culture. I think it mentions a key word here, and it's shame. And I think this, if you think about the British culture many years ago, the stiff upper British lip is where the British culture came from about failure. Can you imagine? We invaded a country in 1700, and there's a little private there stood facing all those nasty men with arrows, and he's got his machine gun, and he turns around to the captain, he says, I think we should talk about our failures to them. And you can just imagine the captain going, bang, get another private up to fire that machine gun. Because it's just unheard of in those days. And I think even up until 100 years ago, that culture still existed in Britain. I think talking about failure in Britain almost gets brushed under the carpet, doesn't it? So this statement here, I really ummed and ahed about putting it in the presentation. It made me love it, then it made me hate it. I loved it, then hated it. And I think it cuts to the heart of the British culture as to what failure is all about.
Question, where's that statement from?
You know what? I actually couldn't tell you. I don't know. I just stumbled across it on the internet. Otherwise, I'd have put the source up there. And in Britain, we love other people's failure. So look at this guy, Eddie the Eagle. Do you remember him? Right. We loved him, didn't we? Because he failed. So that wasn't us stood up in front of 80 testers talking about our failure. That was us going, he's funny because he's failed. It's someone else. So we sort of took him to heart, didn't we? Just like this guy, Frank Bruno, another failing sports star, and yet we thought, yeah, we'll admire him because it's someone else failing. But what about talking about our own failures? So stood up here talking to you guys, I really am bearing my soul. I've never done this before. Never openly talked about my own failures to anybody. So I think this is part of breaking the British culture. Before I move into a few examples, I want to talk about the tool I'm using. It's got the little logo down the bottom, it's Prezi. Has anybody used Prezi? It's quite a cool tool, isn't it? I quite like it. What was that?
I didn't get that far, I gave up, I failed.
Right. Well, I remember going for a job interview. It was for a pharmaceutical company. And the first interview went very well. They invited me back for a second interview where they asked me to present. So I thought, I know. I'll blow them away with Prezi. So I did all my presentation in Prezi, rocked up, booted up the laptop, got the first slide up, started talking, moved on to the second slide, and the director that was interviewing me said, stop. And the conversation went something like this. I'm the director. What the effing hell's that? It's my presentation. I'm talking about the bloody tool. Prezi, it's dead cool, man. But it's different. Are you trying to instigate change here? Yeah, Is that a trick question? Are you a rebel? Are you going to come and destroy everything we've built? And at this point, I'm really perplexed. I'm like, I don't understand what the problem is. And what I'd failed here with this interview was I failed to understand the culture in the company. They don't want change. They're a pharmaceutical company. They didn't want anybody to come in and show them something new, something funky. They actually wanted the presentation in PowerPoint. I had failed to understand the culture within the company and the person that was interviewing me. I had failed in reaching out to the agency and saying, what is the culture within the company? If you take risks or gambles or try something new in a pharmaceutical company, it usually means someone dies. Because it's all about tablets, it's all about saving lives, not killing people. So the whole thing was wrong. I thought it was a funky tool, and lo and behold, it was a funky tool, but it just wasn't right. So the lesson I learnt from then is always to research the company and research the culture within the company. So every time I go for an interview now, I phone up the agency, I ask them what's the culture like in the company, who's the people I'm presenting to or interviewing, what's their likes, what's their dislikes, if I'm presenting, is PowerPoint, and I actually ask the questions now, so I'm aware before I go in the interview what I'm actually facing and what their likes and dislikes are. But that was an epic fail. And the interview was over, but we both smiled and we both sat there and he let me present. And basically, no word of a lie, I knew I was a dead man walking. He didn't want to be in the room. I didn't want to be in the room. It was basically over within about half an hour. It was an epic fail, but I learnt from it and it made me stronger. So I want to talk about PlayStation if I can. I've got 2 examples of 2 epic fails. One of them's an interview again. So I'm being interviewed for PlayStation, and it's the director of European test operations who's interviewing me. It's for quite a senior position. The interview's going quite well, and he turns around and he says, so Leigh, don't forget, it's a gaming company. So Leigh, tell me, as a kid, what game console did you have? To which I replied, eh? And he said, no, as a kid, you must have played some games. You must have had a games console. And I went, no, I didn't, no. And he said, OK. I was too busy mugging old women. So can you cut that bit out? So he said, OK, so what games console have you got now? And what's your favourite genre of games? Let's not forget, it's a gaming company. To which I replied, hey? And then I went, oh, no, stop. I bought a Wii 2 weeks ago for my son. Does that count? You could see the colour drain from his face. And I don't know about you, but I just absolutely despise the job adverts for testers where they say, we need tester with financial experience. And I just hate that kind of stuff, because give me a tester who is curious, an explorer, who can adapt quickly over someone with 15 years experience in an industry. So here I was in an interview facing that very scenario. They obviously wanted a senior manager to come in, but they wanted gaming experience, and I had 0. I'm not a gamer. I actually said in the interview, I don't like games. So it's safe to say it wasn't going well at that point. And as I saw the colour drain from his face, I thought, I've got to pull this around, because this is an epic fail unfolding right in front of me. So I turned it around and I said, I don't need to be a gamer. I don't need to have a games console, because you've got 200 guys out there who are professional gamers testing your games for you. The last thing you actually need is one more professional gamer joining your company. What you need is actually a testing expert to join your company. And you could see the colour come back into his face. And from that, it was a fail, but I managed to swing it around just about. So I did get the job, and the next example is a fail from within when I'd started PlayStation. We actually have someone here tonight who was actually on the receiving end of this fail, John. Yeah. So the culture within PlayStation, would it be fair to say, John, that it was quite... Go on, what would you say it was?
It's kind of like being in school.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you said that. I would have used army, but school will do. So I joined this company that had a culture of they had two different shifts, a daytime shift and an evening shift. And any company where you have those kind of shifts, you have to have people breaking at particular times. So 10:30, everybody would get up their chairs, go for a fag break. And I was like, what's happening? Everyone's going. And everyone would go out, have their fag break, come back 10 minutes earlier. And because the canteen couldn't cope with 600 people going for their food at once, everybody had to have their allocated time slots for lunch. So it was very regimented, wasn't it? So when I joined there, I'm trying to work out what the culture is. And I'm thinking, it's quite, like, dictator, sort of authoritarian. It's quite, you will do this. I thought, Christ, I'm not sure I can cope in this, but I better adapt to it. So I wanted to make a big change, and the big change affected the evening shift, of which John was part of the evening shift. And it was probably my worst fail that I've ever done, and it's probably my most embarrassing and probably something I'm most ashamed of, this fail. And I wanted to introduce a change, but I introduced it via email. Has anybody ever been sacked via text or email? I didn't do that. I'm just asking a question, just that I can draw a comparison. Because as soon as I clicked that send button with the change in the email, it destroyed all respect, all time anybody had for me, and I was back to 0 points again. And it was the most embarrassing and most ashamed I've ever been once I'd realised what I'd done. And although it was an epic fail, it does feel like Alcoholics Anonymous, this. I feel like I'm opening up. You know what? It was an epic fail, but I learned so much from it, because never again did I instigate a change via text or email. Myself and Craig drove the length and breadth of Britain trying to make sure that we didn't do it other than face-to-face. So I worked with Craig in 2 companies, and the last company we were both managers. And from that, the impact it had on your evening shift was absolutely detrimental. Yeah. So you even know, yeah. I know, yeah. I still get hate mail now. Have voodoo dolls every now and again. I get pain in my back. But yeah, it was a terrible, honestly. But the positive, although it was a failure, the positive is that I learnt that through instigating change can't be done on email. If you're affecting people's lives where it's affecting their working pattern or a benefit that they've had that you're taking away, you cannot do it on email. And that's something that I've still carried through to today. So if the guys from PlayStation watch that, they'll come after me again, won't they? Okay, so we've got a choice now. You can either have the fail story regarding Spock and Anakin, or you can have the fail story regarding digital rights management. Show of hands, who wants digital rights management? Okay, who wants Anakin and Spock? Is there a judge in the room? I think we'll go with Anakin and Spock. Can I just grab some water first? So, Dr. Spock. Do we all know who Dr. Spock is? He's logical, he's methodical. He's a curious explorer.
I'd say Dr. Spock would have been
Was it that's Mr. Spock, Doctor?
Oh, is it Mr. Spock?
He's a child psychologist or some such thing.
Thanks for the correction. He's a walking encyclopedia, that guy, isn't he? So, using long words and everything. So, Mr. Spock, sorry. Do you know him personally? No? Okay. So, logical, methodical, took no risks, but a curious explorer. Let's talk about, sorry, what's the, Anakin Skywalker? Is that all right? Okay. So Anakin Skywalker, but let's be clear, from Clone Wars, not the film, okay? Let's be perfectly clear. I wouldn't like to be heckled again. So Anakin Skywalker is rebellious, he takes risks, he's a live wire. He's a curious explorer, but just a different kind of curious explorer to Spock. And what these two guys represent, for me, is exploratory testing, structured testing. So your test cases, yada yada, exploratory testing. So let's start with the success with this. I was at Sony Ericsson, I had a team of 6. And you know, managers come over to you and they say silly things like, when do you think you'll be finished running your test cases? I'd much rather they said something like, when do you think you will have found all the showstoppers? When can development start working on bugs that you've found? This thing about finishing test cases is very much an old school test manager mindset, isn't it? So he came over and he said, when do you think you'll be finished your test cases, Lee? And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I bet you I can find all the showstoppers within 3 days. The test cycle took 10 days at this point. So I've given him a clear message. I'll find all showstoppers within 3 days. So what I did was I split the team in two. There were 6 people in the team. 3 people became Anakin Skywalker. 3 people became Mr. Spock. So the Mr. Spock team took 10 working days to execute their test cases. The Anakin Skywalker team took 3 days to do their exploratory testing. They found 95% of all bugs. They found 100% of all showstoppers. And the beauty was, within those 3 days, the bugs had gone back to development. They were fixed and sitting in a release ready for us to test. So there's the success bit, the power of exploratory testing. So where's the fail? The talk is all about fail is not a dirty word. So the fail came in the company myself and Craig worked at. I joined this company. It was a clinical software firm. The test team, average age was about 50. The test team was made up of ex-nurses, no Stacon Martin, not those kind. It was made up of ex-nurses and clerical staff from the hospitals. Okay, so there wasn't a single professional tester in sight. All they'd ever done and all they ever knew was how to run test cases. That's all they ever knew. They had this test suite and all they did each test cycle was run the test cases. That's all they knew. They'd never met Anakin before. So the fail here is I wasn't strong enough to enforce the Anakin way of working. The fail here is that it took auditors to come on site and tell us. You'd imagine auditors would love the structured testing. No. These auditors didn't. They wanted to see more exploratory testing. They said, you're not doing enough. In fact, you're not doing any. And that was the fail. So what we did straight after that was we corrected that fail. And we had a test cycle. Test cycle took 5 days, a team of round about 40 testers. So we made it 4 days, cut it down by a day. In those 4 days, they found 5 bugs. 40 people, 5 bugs. On the last day, we paired everybody up to do pair testing. We gave a technical tester, a non-technical tester to work with. We created 20 pairs. And from that, in fact, let's go interactive again. How many bugs do you think they found in 1 day? They found 5 bugs in 4 days. Any guesses from the crowd? None of the think money people, because you know the answer. Anybody want to shout out? 10?
45.
30?
65.
Oh, so we've had a couple of close ones, 55 bugs in 1 day, just by exploratory testing. So we grabbed a failure. We started off with the success at Sony Ericsson. We had a semi-failure at the clinical software firm, but we turned it into a success. And that gave the people there the insight as to the power of exploratory testing. So let's move on to DRM. I love this picture. It's really sexy, isn't it? I love the figure of the phone and the curves on the phone. It's just a real sexy picture. So Craig, help me out. What phone's that? That's a code name. These guys won't know code names.
I don't know, W900?
It's the W960, I think. So Sony Ericsson was ranked number 2 in the world at some point, believe it or not, probably before some of you were born. So number 1 was always Nokia, Sony Ericsson was number 2, I think Siemens was number 3 and Samsung was number 4. Those were the top 4 guys. Motorola as well, sorry. So they were the top 5 guys. Coming on the outside, blindsiding everybody, was BlackBerry, Microsoft and Apple. So those were the new guys on the block. We're going back to around 2006, something like that. Sony Ericsson was in trouble because it had become complacent. It thought it was unstoppable. They thought, we're number 2 in the world. They'd created a few phones before this that had epically failed in sales. Poor quality, too much functionality, not enough usability. So this was the phone that was going to save Sony Ericsson. And the reason it was going to save Sony Ericsson, does everybody know what digital rights management is? And don't be worried if you don't. Shout out if you don't. No. Okay, so it's a way of controlling your digital content at this time on your phones. So you could buy content and you could play it 5 times, for example, or you could play content and play it for a year, or you could buy content and pass it on to a friend, but you'd have to pay for it. So this was going to be the model in which all the operators were going to make their money. So if you downloaded a song, a video, or a picture, you were going to pay for it, and you were going to be able to render it X amount of times or over a certain period. So this was what all the operators were going mental for around about 2006, 2007. And Sony Ericsson was in trouble. So the operator said, if you can get DRM working in this phone, we'll take the phone. And lo and behold, I was the test team leader for digital rights management. So I thought, yeah, cool. So the operators want this phone. This is my opportunity to shine. I thought I'm going to have carte blanche to get a team together. It could be a big team. I've got visions of me being carried around Sony Ericsson on the shoulders of people, being the saviour of Sony Ericsson because I've got DRM working. Me, alone, nobody else. I'm going to build a team. They're going to say, here is Leigh Rathbone. And they're going to parade me through the corridors of Sony Ericsson going, Leigh Rathbone, DRM. And by the title of the talk, you can probably work out that didn't really materialise. So how was it a fail? Well, I had a team on shore, a brilliant team on shore, and they looked after the test environment, getting the test data together, going to test bashes. So yeah, test bashes aren't a new thing. They've been happening for years and years, guys. While the team offshore, I thought, yeah, this is where I'm going to prove my worth to Sony Ericsson. I'm going to build the biggest set of test cases Sony Ericsson's ever seen, and that's going to be my legacy to Sony Ericsson. Because that's how you judge a great test team leader, isn't it? You're already working probably out where the fail's coming. So, of course, when you're dealing with an outsourced company, if you give them that remit, especially an Indian outsourced company that are very, very strong on pulling test cases out of requirements, what's actually going to happen is you're going to end up with a very large amount of test cases. And the fail isn't the number of test cases, it's the fail is that I actually buried my head in the sand because I could see it happening. The fail is that by checking in regularly, I saw this enormous amount of test cases being generated, and I thought, oh shit. I thought, what am I going to do? Do I pull the brakes on them? Do I let them finish the job and then tell them off? I can't tell them off. They're doing exactly what I've told them to do, and they're actually working to their strengths. When you work with Indian outsourced companies, their strengths are they're full of Spocks. They're full of people who love to pick up a requirement and write a test case and execute. So the failure was I didn't control them. I didn't put any control mechanisms in place. And I'm not talking micromanagement. I'm just talking control mechanisms, some check-in points, some points where we could meet and say, are we on the right path? Maybe we should have failed fast. Maybe we should have succeeded quicker. I don't know. But they ended up. Have I actually told you how many test cases they wrote yet? Okay, interactive bit again. Does anybody want to take a stab? And here's a clue. It's over 5,000. Okay, so hands up again. Who thinks it's 6,000? 7,000? Oh, you know the game now, don't you? This is rubbish. This is rubbish. I'm just going to cut to the chase then. It was 20,000 test cases they wrote. They created a beast for me, and that was the fail. But from the fail came success. Okay. Do you see my ninja reactions then? Jesus Christ. So from there, I learnt that you need certain control mechanisms when you're dealing with outsourced companies. They don't like to be micromanaged, and I don't like to micromanage. But we started doing something quite radical. Don't forget, this was 2006. We started having 3 meetings a week, very short, sharp meetings. And we spoke about what we did yesterday, what we're doing tomorrow, and what's blocking us. Sound familiar? This was 2006. Somehow, can someone answer that? In about 1988, I remember reading an article about the Nissan factory up in Washington. Is that round about Sunderland? And this article was all about how the Japanese had these stand-up meetings on the factory floor, and they asked these basic questions. And somehow, subconsciously, it stuck in my head. And I'm not saying I'm a founder of Agile by any means of it, because I'm not. But basically, I played with this idea of having 3 very short, sharp meetings each week. But when the meetings were finished, we took it a step further. We stayed on the lines, and we spoke about birthdays. We talked about religious holidays. We spoke about what people had done over the weekend. We got personal with an offshore team. Imagine that. We started doing bios on each other and exchanging them. We started grabbing photos of each other and exchanging them. We even started, dare we say it, telling jokes and enjoying ourselves. And the meeting only lasted half an hour. The first 10 minutes was going around the room and saying, you know, what is it you're doing, etc. But the last 20 minutes was actually getting to know them as human beings, trying to get them to be creative, trying to understand the power of exploratory testing. And you know what? We ended up with a cracking offshore team. We really did. They were fantastic after my epic fail, not their epic fail. That was my fail, not theirs. And it was a really enjoyable experience, to the point where it was a company called Wipro, which, if anybody's dealt with outsourced companies, that's, I think, one of the second biggest in India. And this team that I built up and decided to work with instead of just giving tasks to, ended up winning Team of the Year in a company Wipro size. And I think that shows the collaborative approach and how it can help build relations and improve your working relationships with offshore companies. So that was my epic fail with outsourced companies. I put that in just in case you decided to go with DRM first, okay, so we can skip that. I want to finish on this, and it is the end of the I don't know how long I've taken, but this is the last slide. So has anybody seen this film? Yeah. Okay, better start with who hasn't. Oh, crap. Okay. Right. So I'm not going to spoil it for you. But this film is all about software testing. This film is all about curious explorers. It's about a character who is a curious explorer, and he has to keep failing. And he fails over and over again. But he keeps pushing himself into a different dimension, coming up with different techniques, different approaches. He's a curious explorer, he's a tester. He's a tester at heart. And he's looking for the solution to save the human race. And I'm sorry, I'm not spoiling the storyline, by the way. It's quite obvious what the story is within a few minutes of the film. And he has to send these wacky ideas, he has to send them back to somebody to receive them. And this person that he sends these ideas back to has a closed mind completely. So the ideas just keep bouncing off and they're not received. And then eventually this person opens their mind a tiny amount, enough to let the idea in. And that person takes these wacky, crazy ideas from this crazy bloke somewhere else, this curious explorer. And they take the craziness of his ideas and they make them work. They put them into proper working solutions and they save the human race. And I think that's us. We're curious explorers. We need to keep throwing those wacky ideas out there, guys. And if we get them bounced back off us, don't lose that desire, that will and that determination to keep coming up with wacky ideas, because eventually one of those wacky ideas will get accepted and will solve a big problem. And that's my last slide, so I just wanted to say thank you very much.